Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're joined with Andy Pedley, who is going to be giving us an overview of his background in beekeeping and talk to us a little bit about the importance of pollinators and their power over the planet. So welcome, Andy. Lovely to see you today.
Thank you very much indeed. So
I've
I got into beekeeping. Got my first colony in about 1991, I think it was. We went to the Southampton show, and there was some people there at the Southampton show. They were doing a demonstration of beekeeping, and they were incredible. They could make bees sing and dance, and I just kept going back and back and back. I changed jobs and suddenly realised I had a bit more time, so I found the local beekeeping association, became a member, was sold my first hive, and that was the rest is history, as they say. I've gone from strength to strength. I've kept bees all over the place. Used to be in London. My friend was the royal beekeeper at Buckingham Palace, so I kept bees with him or helped him. I was always his assistant royal beekeeper, and Lambeth Palace. And now I'm in Oxfordshire, and I keep bees. I've got at the moment 9 hives of my own. They're fairly local, but I'm also a member of Oxfordshire Beekeepers Association. We've got a teaching apiary. That's up near Blenheim Palace, about a mile away from Blenheim Palace. And I'm the apiary manager for that as well. So that's been keeping me busy for the last 5 years as well. So it's a great way to pass the time.
Oh, it sounds like a fantastic hobby that you've developed and also been a job for you, hasn't it, for a long time?
Well,
So
yeah, I was talking to a friend a little while ago, and she said, "Well, what do you do for beekeeping?" I said, well, I do this and I do that and do the other. And she said, "It sounds much more like a job than a pastime."
I just want to acknowledge the wonderful shirt that you're wearing today because it really is fantastic.
A friend sent it to me from Australia. He saw it and thought, "That's Andy," so he bought it and posted it over to me. Ridiculously generous chap.
Andy, do you mind talking me through what a sort of typical day looks like for you then?
It's hugely variable. I mean, in the winter, beekeeping is a really quiet activity. One of the lovely things about keeping bees is that if it's cold and wet, the bees don't want to see you, and you don't want to go out and see the bees. But this time of year, it's much more busy. At the moment, the season is being really amazing. I managed to get all my colonies through the winter. I think it's the first time in all my years beekeeping that I managed to get bees to survive, all my colonies to survive. We lost one up at the teaching apiary, but that's actually a really good record for me. Very pleased with that. And later on today, I will be going and seeing hives about a quarter of a mile from home. As I say, it's a busy time of year. The colonies have increased in population. This is a natural cycle. During the winter, they get quite a small population. Then during the spring, it builds up. And the thing that we have to be careful of is that they're going to swarm. So they produce a new queen. The old queen, half the bees fly. And of course, half your workforce flies as well. So that reduces your honey crop. And then a swarm is also bad news because they can get into neighbours' lofts or something like that. So you want to stop them swarming, and you want to hear about them if they do swarm. So you go and collect them and contain them back in a hive before they make a nuisance of themselves. Swarm collecting is quite fun. So that's today. Last night I went up to the teaching apiary and did a bit of management poddle time, just sort of checking up on things. The bee course actually starts tonight, so the apiary needs to be in absolutely pristine condition. And I spent a part of yesterday making up equipment as well, because there's a really good honey flow happening at the moment. And I'm running out of equipment, and it's the 6th of May. And this is extraordinary. So I'm busy making up new equipment, and that will be going on to hives later today or possibly on Thursday. So a typical day is very variable. Sometimes you don't have to do anything at all. Sometimes you're really busy.
So tell me a little bit about why bees are so important to us then.
So the main role is pollination. People always think bees, honey. The honey that I produce is a nice little sideline, really. I got into them mainly for environmental reasons. I thought it'd be an interesting environmental hobby to have. And actually, beekeeping is a bit of a two-edged sword, really. And I'll explain that. Bees generally are, of course, pollinators, and pollination is hugely important to us. any crop that needs pollination. So locally, we get a lot of oilseed rape being planted. That's out at the moment. Walk past a field of beans, apples, all sorts of crops are incredibly dependent on being pollinated. And honeybees are, of course, very organized. They have the wonderful bee dance, which enables them to communicate. They can tell their sisters that there is honey, there's nectar. They can tell their sisters which direction they go in, how far, and they even tell their sisters what they're looking for. They give them a taste of what they're looking for. So 200 yards straight towards the sun, and you're looking for apple nectar. And that's great. But the problem with that is that they are organized and outcompete other species. So in the UK, there are about 250 different species of bee. 24 of them are bumblebees, and all the rest, one is honeybees, and all the rest are solitary bees, mason bees, leafcutter bees, that kind of thing. And our honeybees get there first, so to speak. They know the way. They're there. They overwinter as a colony. In the middle of the winter, the colony contains about 12,000 bees. In the summer, up to 50,000, as I mentioned. So they are incredibly organized. They communicate, and the solitary bees are outcompeted. An environment has a thing called a carrying capacity. This is the number of species or number of pollinators an environment can carry. And if you have too many honeybee colonies, then that will, I'm absolutely sure, deplete the number of bumblebees and solitary bees. So honeybees are a bit of a two-edged sword. But in terms of the importance of the environment, they are critical. If we didn't have pollination, then the flowering species wouldn't exist. We wouldn't get the foods that we get, or many of the foods we get, things like apples, all nuts and so on. So our diet would be much reduced. But in terms of the environment, there'll be a huge environmental change. All the flowering plants would reduce because there's no pollination taking place. So then we get more wind pollination. And over time, the entire ecosystem would change to reflect that.
Can I just ask then, when you say solitary bees, are these bees that don't live within a hive system?
Yeah, that's right. So
Mm.
solitary bees live by themselves. The clue is in the name, obviously. So if you get a bee hotel, and the simplest bee hotel, a very easy thing to make, you get a block of wood. Ideally, it hasn't been treated with pesticide. So fence posts are out, but a bit of floor joist is in. You drill some holes in it. The holes need to be anything from about 2 millimeters diameter to about 10 millimeters diameter, so 2, 4, 6, 8. And you put that in the sun. And what will happen, hopefully, stick on the wall about 1 meter, 2 meters high. What will happen, hopefully, is that a solitary bee will come along, go, oh, somebody's made a home for me. And it will move in. For instance, leafcutter bees. So they'll then go to the local plants, they'll cut a little section out of a leaf. They'll make a little packet. It's the size of a paracetamol tablet. In the packet, they will put some pollen, which is the protein. They'll put some nectar, and they'll lay an egg. Then they'll complete the packet, and they'll make another one, until it's about that length, probably 8 or 10 little packets. And then it'll go to the next hole, the next hole, the next hole. These things are really fun. And what's happening in there, their larvae, their eggs hatch and their larvae develop, but they take 12 months to do that. So a bee hotel will remain plugged for 12 months. And then in the spring next year, you'll see bees emerge, and the tubes, little cavities, will get reused by the bees. And the whole thing's extraordinary. You'd think the ones that were laid first would hatch before the ones that were laid last. Somehow evolution has made it so that they hatch in the wrong order. The last couple that are laid will be males. Males are obviously needed to mate, but you don't need so many boys as girls. So if a parasite comes along and lays an egg, then it is a boy who is disposable, and the girls at the back will survive. So evolution is just quite unbelievable.
It's amazing the complexity of it all, isn't it? I think we all associate bees with honey, don't we? But actually, it's so much more complicated than that, and there's so much more that they offer to the world, and they're
Oh yes,
such an essential.
I meant to mention I did say I've got my special bee mug, which is printed with all sorts of different bumblebee species on it. I saw it in where did I see it? Waterstones, I think it was, and thought that is coming home with me. It's too good.
You've talked about this a little bit already, but what role do they have in supporting ecosystem health then?
So they're just part of the ecosystem. Something we're incredibly aware of now is the importance of everything in the ecosystem, the holistic approach to the ecosystem. And if something goes, then it's weakened, and it's death by 1,000 cuts, isn't it? Something goes, something else goes, something else goes, something else goes, and we aren't aware of the depletion. We aren't aware of that one going and that one going and that one going, but then cumulatively it affects it. As I say, our foods, the fruits and many vegetable things like tomatoes are going to be dependent on pollination, so they're dependent on bees. Nature itself is dependent on it. So berries are dependent on bees. Winter birds are dependent on berries. It's that kind of linkage, but so much, so rich.
And it's really nice that you talk about the holistic approach and the systems thinking, because you're absolutely right. There's all these different species of bee, and we need to think about what the role they all play and how they all support different factors of the ecosystem.
And they have
It's
different habitats, so you'll find different ones in different areas. And of course, that's one of the things that climate change is affecting. As it gets warmer, some species will thrive, but others will be depleted. So it is of consequence.
So would you mind sharing with us a few facts and figures about British bees then?
Okay, well, so in terms of beekeepers, I think there's probably about 20 to 30,000 of us at the moment. There's a thing called British Beekeepers Association. There's 250 species of bee in the UK, 24 bumblebees, one honeybee, and the rest are all the solitary bees. Number of hives in the country is probably around 100,000, something like that. It's very hard to count. FERA do have a bee inspectorate who are actually really critical, really important. And they have a thing called BeeBase. So all beekeepers are supposed to register on BeeBase. If you register on BeeBase, they know where you are. If there's an outbreak of something, European foul brood or American foul brood near you, they will come and inspect your hives to make sure you're clear. They will do random checks, and their big job at the moment is well, I think two aspects to it at the moment. One is the yellow-legged hornet, Vespa velutina nigrithorax, which came into the UK about 3 years ago. There have been sporadic incidents, and that's a big threat, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, presently. And the other one is they check imported bees. So people bring queen bees in from overseas. They do that because they believe that the genetics of the queen bee is better in some way. They're gentler, or they're more productive, or whatever. So, of course, in a beehive, the queen is the mother to all the bees. So if you've got a queen bee who has got very gentle genetics, not stingy, then after a few weeks, all the bees in that hive are her progeny, her daughters. And so that it will reflect, the gentleness will be reflected in the behavior of the hive. So people quite like to import bees, queen bees. The yellow-legged hornet, the story behind it is that it came from Asia. It was imported into the south of France a number of years ago. I don't know how long. It spread across France, and it's all across Europe, Portugal, Spain, and it's now rife across Europe. It's able to survive a journey across the sea. They can get blown. So Jersey has got a big problem. They just get carried across on the wind, and Guernsey as well. The Channel seems to be a fairly effective barrier to them, but they get carried across. There's one brought across some vegetables last year, the year before. And last 2 years ago, there were quite a number of nests found in the UK. They worked unbelievably hard and did an absolutely incredible job controlling them. Each nest had to be tracked. They catch a hornet and mark it, and then they watch it fly. If I caught a hornet, I'm not allowed to release it. It's an invasive, non-native species. So if I catch one, I have to destroy it, but I have to report it as well on the non-native species helpline. And they would come and collect it. Verify it's a yellow-legged hornet. They come and collect it, and then it would be laboratory examined, and they do the DNA on it, and they can tell wonderful things from the DNA. They can tell if it overwintered in the UK, it's a daughter from a nest in the UK, or if it's a new import. Extraordinary what the DNA tells them. And at the moment, they're on top of it, but sooner or later, it will break out. And that will devastate beehives if it gets out of control. We'll have to learn a new method of management. And it will change the environment, because it doesn't just go after honeybees, it goes after virtually any insect. It will be really serious when it gets out.
Wow. So that's sort of introducing us a little bit into why are bees disappearing and under threat. Can you share a bit of information about that?
That's the biggest threat to them at the moment, the yellow-legged hornet, and it won't confine its activity to honeybees. I mentioned the importation thing. Bringing foreign queens in isn't a problem, but they may bring diseases in that we haven't got, or they may bring diseases in that we have got, but create a new infection zone, and so require controls. There are a couple of insects, other insects, a thing called Tropolelaps, which is, I think, in Italy at the moment. No, not sure what Tropolelaps is. It's a very, very tiny mite. I don't know its life cycle at all, but it is a concern. And there's a thing called the small hive beetle, which gets into the hive. It reproduces in the hive, or it lays its eggs in the hive. The larvae eat the honeycomb, the wax, whatever they want to eat. They drop on the ground underneath and pupate actually in the ground, and then the cycle repeats. Now I think they're in Italy, South Italy at the moment. So we're concerned about imports bypassing controls, because those insects could come in and start infestation. They're notifiable diseases in the UK if you do get them. The other big concern for beekeepers is honey. Go to Tesco's, other supermarkets are available, and also sell cheap honey. And you buy a pot of honey for £2-3, and it's an import. And the concern is there's a huge amount of honey fraud going on at the moment. Honey is fundamentally sugar syrup. It's a mixture of different sugars. So there's fructose and glucose and maltose and all sorts. And different plant crops produce different sugars. So that's why honey is all sorts of different colors. The fraudsters have got really, really good at mimicking honey. So they produce different sugars, and they mix them and produce a syrup that is, in a laboratory, a simple analysis, very similar to honey. But it undervalues the honey is the thing. It cuts the price of honey. Why would you buy one of my beautiful, lovingly made jars of honey for £7 when you go to Tesco's and get a jar off the shelf for 3, 2, 1? If you're in the third world and honey is a big part of the developing world, and a big part of your income is from honey production, and no one will take your honey because it's too expensive, then that affects your ability to produce honey. That then feeds back to, you don't keep bees anymore. Why do I keep bees if I can't sell the honey? So you don't keep bees anymore. So now there are fewer pollinators, so that affects the crops around. And this is affecting countries' economies. It is extraordinary. I think it's Jeff Pettis and the National Honey Show YouTube channel, and there's a talk called the honey market in turmoil, and it's worth a watch. I have seen it and seen Jeff a couple of times, but It's 2 or 3 years old now, but it's still absolutely valid. I didn't mention one other thing that's a danger to bees, and that, of course, is pesticides. They're insects. You spray an insecticide, it is going to affect bees. Or you use an insecticide, it is going to affect bees. The one, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but the one that of greatest concern at the moment is the neonicotinoids, which is the seed dressing. Incredibly toxic. And they are absolutely great at navigating. They find their way home. If I move my beehive from here to here, the bees will come back here and go, home's gone, where's gone? Less than 3 feet, they will find it. Much more than that, they will get lost. Neonicotinoids, they're like me having a heavy night out, and I can't find my way home from the pub. So it just destroys their ability to navigate just that little bit, and they can't find their way home. And so while the LD50 test, what's the test for toxicity? It's been LD50 for years. And it passes the LD50 test, but actually the consequences are much more subtle than people realize, and the tests aren't adequate for that. And if you disrupt that life cycle of the colony, so you destroy the ability of the worker bees to come home, then the food doesn't come home. So then that knocks on, obviously, the colony can't survive. I think there are other effects as well, but the consequences are very subtle. So we are really concerned about neonicotinoids and being used. I think, again, I'm not an expert, but I understand they're quite persistent and they get into the soil, all sorts of things. So
we've got these 4 major issues then. We've got the yellow-legged hornet.
yep.
We've got the changes in sort of Brexit and bypassing of inspection and quarantine processes, which is leading to disease and parasites coming in that are a risk. We've got the worries around the economy of of honey making, where that's being undermined by fraudulent honey making. And then we've also got the impact of insecticides, which are impacting the life cycle of the bee as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Lots to think about, isn't it?
There is.
So on that note then, how can vets and veterinary professionals help to support bees?
So I think veterinary professionals, I think probably the main role is that you go out and see people and people in agriculture and so on. So there are several things. One is awareness of the yellow-legged hornet. If we are going to control this thing and beat it, we need to know where it is and get to it before it gets the reproductive stages issuing, which is sort of late in the year, September, October, is when the reproductive, the gynes go out. And if we can get the nests before that happens, then you've stopped that nest from developing. But if it happens, then each nest can produce up to 300 fertile queens. So one nest producing 300 fertile queens, it really is Pandora's box. So awareness of the yellow-legged hornet is one thing. Habitat change we haven't discussed, but actually, having things like hedgerows, glorious around Oxfordshire at the moment. A few weeks ago, we had the blackthorn out, and then at the moment we've got hawthorn out, and last week we had dandelions, just wonderful wildflowers, places where bees can prosper, just little bits of countryside that are allowed to flower and allowed to develop naturally. And if you're going to cut your hedge, there are rules about when you cut them for bird life, but also actually it's going to flower and I'll cut it after the flowering stage. Even better, don't cut it at all if you can avoid it, because the berries that the flowers will produce are better for birds as well. So awareness of yellow hornets, obviously minimizing pesticides. We do need plant control, plant protection products. We have 8 billion people that need to be fed, and we do need plant protection products. But the minimizing it, using it very carefully. I mean, the rules that there are to protect the pollinating species don't spray when there's stuff in flower, that kind of thing. And neonicotinoids, avoiding them whenever you possibly can, because they are, really toxic. And I think the consequence of them is still being studied. And if a beekeeper comes up to you and says, "I'd love to have some bees. Is there any space on your land that I could put some bees?" Actually, think about that seriously. The going rent, as far as I'm concerned, is a pot of jar. Well, I do 2 pots of jar because I do smaller jars. 2 pots of jar per 2 pots of honey per hive, um, and most beekeepers will bring not just bees, better pollination, a couple of jars of honey. If you've got a farm shop, I have hives on a place called Cooper's Rest. So the honey is badged up as Cooper's Rest honey, and it has a premium. So if you've got a farm shop and you've got a local beekeeper, and they're on your land, you can have your honey in there in your shop, and that's a good thing. If you've got an odd log and a drill and a bit of time, make a bee hotel for those solitary bees. They would love that. Stand it vertically and watch what happens. Just watch and enjoy.
Being paid in honey sounds like the absolute dream, if you ask me. That's
It
really,
is
really
very. Some years you
fantastic.
don't get much crop at all. Some years you do. Last year was phenomenal, and this year is looking to be absolutely great. But a couple of jars of honey, and for quite a small amount of space, and it will bring riches beyond honey.
Yeah, amazing. And vets can obviously have the discussion with clients about insecticides and try and raise awareness around those products. It's trying to remember to look at everything as a wider picture,
Yeah.
and as a system, isn't it? And not get drawn into just trying to find one solution for one problem, but think what's the bigger problem here and what might
Yep.
be the implications of the solution.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Well, Andy, thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat to you and really appreciate you giving up your time. It's been really interesting hearing about your beekeeping, and hopefully everyone's
You're
enjoyed
very welcome.
learning
Have
a
a good
bit
day.
about it. Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome. Bye bye.